One of the things that we promised to do earlier, which was one of the reasons why we switched to using Sass in the first place, was that we were going to come back and look at the different places where we were using absolute CSS units. For the most part, that's going to mean pixels. And we would switch over to using relative measurements where it made sense. So here, in our site footer component, is a place where we can start. And then we'll go through all of our other components and see if there's additional places where we can make this change. So now our margin here is the space between this text. As we demonstrated before, when a user changes the font size in the browser, anything that's measured in pixels will remain that size. Anything that's using a relative CSS unit, however, will have its size adjusted. In this case, we want this margin to be relative to the size of the text. As the text gets bigger, we would expect the space between the text to get bigger as well. So when it comes to relative size, there's two basic options. One, we can measure relative to the root font size of the site, which would mean using a unit called rem, or we can measure relative to the size of the font of this element, which makes more sense in this case. So for margin left and margin right, let's change this to a relative size. Now to play with this, I'm going to go in the browser, make sure that one of these is selected, and we'll choose a unit. Now for relative units, we can use either EMs or a percentage. In this kind of scenario, I've seen EMs used a lot more, so I'm going to stick with that. And so if we're going to use EMs, the sizing is relative to the size of the font. Right now, because we're not defining a size for this font, it's going to default to the browser's default, which is 16 pixels. So if we use 1 EM, it's going to be 16 pixels. If we want to calculate how many EMs we need, what we'll do is take the margin that we're using now, which is right, so that's 10 pixels, and we'll divide it by 16, and what we'll come up with is 0.625. So if we changed margin left here to 0.625 EM, and then we did the same thing to margin right down here, the sizing should look the same. Yep, that looks good.